That's what you want to do first. You never want to mark it until you're happy with where everything is and then mark. Because once you mark or tripod, you've kind of established a specific path of insertion, and you don't want to establish it and then not like it and then have to go back and change everything, okay? So the goal is to first look at the teeth. Make sure all the teeth seem to be about in the same alignment. If they're all in the same alignment, then you can use the occlusal plane and make it perpendicular to a table or the floor. If one tooth is really tilted, that's your outlier. Don't try and adjust for that. Know that that tooth will need modifications or something else, okay? But all of these are pretty even. So you're gonna tilt it so your occlusal plane appears flat this way, but you also wanna look from front to back. So you wanna look in both angles, okay? So you wanna look right to left and front to back. And it's probably gonna take a couple times to get it so that everything looks about the same. Another way to check it is using your analyzing rod, which is the one that doesn't have any undercuts on it, and it just helps you. It's the last one I'm gonna pull out. There we go. It's just flat. It helps you kind of see where undercuts and the guide planes will go before you mark anything. So if you put this in, if you loosen here, this will come up and down easier, and if you tighten it, it'll keep it from being too loose. So if you look, you kind of want to say, okay, what does my undercut here look like in comparison to here, in comparison to here? Mm-hmm. And also you want to look at the buckle, where on the tooth is it touching versus this side? And that helps you again see, is it about balance from front to back and right to left? So it looks like everything's kind of touching in the same spot, which tells me that I like the plane I've established. Only then do you want a tripod and survey. So the reason we do this is because we're saying, if I get an RPD made, I'm gonna talk as loud as I can. I'm sorry, but I'm losing my voice, so this is about as high as I can go. So if there's an RPD on here, we want the patient to be able to put it on and take it off in one pathway, right? So the pathway we create with the cast is the same type of preps we want in the mouth, which is the same thing we want our lab to use. So we have to put tripod marks to say, look, this is what I decided chair side. I want you as a lab to use the exact same tripod marks I did when you're doing things in the laboratory. So when you tripod, what you do, we're gonna get the graphite in here. So you should have something like this, and then a piece of graphite. I usually put the sheath on one side. You don't want to press too hard because it's gonna snap. So something like this, and then I just turn it the way. So like any abutment tooth, what I'm gonna do is you want the tip of it to be at the gum line so that any marks that are made from the side of the graphite, not the edge. Because whatever, I have one, but it's a pen or pencil, it doesn't matter.
Pen?
Something, yes. So imagine this, here's your graphite, here's the tooth. If we lifted the graphite up, if we lifted the tip of the graphite up to here and we touched it against the tooth, we'd make a mark here. But that's arbitrary, that's not accurate. This is actually right here, the bulkiest part of the tooth. So if you have the graphite all the way down to the gingival margin and then put it on the tooth, you're gonna get a mark at the actual bulkiest part of the tooth. So don't ever lift it prematurely, try to keep it at the gingiva so that whatever marks is always your height of contour. So if you hold this here and you go around the tooth that we're thinking of, and we're keeping the tip, I'm always trying to keep the tip of it by the gum line, you're still gonna end up with marks that are at the height of contour. So you guys saw how I had the tip of the graphite down here, but the markings are up here because that's where the bulkiest part of the tooth is. So when you look interproximal, The bulkiest part is near the occlusal. When we do a guide plane, we want, after we've guide planed, to go back and mark and get a very broad square that marks, not just a little line like we have right now. Because as she showed, remember she showed when a proximal plate rests against the tooth, if it only touches up here, everything below that's going to be this open space that has food trapping. It's going to be unaesthetic and it's going to cause issues. So you have to guide plane and flatten out the tooth so that there's a wider contact for the proximal plate and it's more gingival. So in the patient, you would take a burr that's very flat and go in and actually create it and try to hold it at the angle that you've created with your path of insertion and go to every tooth at that same angle when you guide plane. Today, you guys are going to use the wax carver to do the same thing. So I'm not going to do the rest of the surveying, but just so you know with the tripoding, once you're ready to do that, you want it to be 3 widely spaced points, so you want to put it low enough that it can be broad on 3 different spots. So I'm going to leave it on the platform, I'm not lifting it, and I make 1 mark, 2 marks, and then I go over here and I make my 3rd mark. And then you usually circle it in red so the lab sees it. But the idea is if I were to tilt this cast or take it off and put it back on, as long as I put it on and can touch the same that I did now into those 3 exact spots, I've gone back to that path of insertion that I originally started with. So if I were to move this and then try to get it back, if I can touch all those points, I'm back to where I started.
Sorry, I have a question. Does it matter that the mark is a little bit upper or lower?
Well, no, because the mark is representing the plane you've made. A plane is flat, right?
Okay.
So it's going to mark where it marks because of that plane. The second you move the cast, it'll mark in a different spot, but then the back marks become wrong too. So all 3 marks have to happen when you're in the same plane. Okay? It's a reference point to communicate to your lab or to take it off and put it back on. So with the wax carver today, after you've done, I want you to survey this tooth, and this tooth. Okay. After you've done that, you're going to go in and start working on your guide planes and rest preps. And those are marked in the manual which teeth. We're doing number 3, 6, 11, and 14, I believe. So you can take the side of this carver, rest it against the tooth. Again, you want the tip of it right at the gingiva because you don't want to carve a ledge in there. You want to carve with the side of the carver. You want to shave away. Okay? So you're just going to hold it and you're going to kind of rotate in a circle a little bit because you don't want to cut a straight line. Remember, she said you want to still keep the shape of the tooth. And you're trying to go about 1/3 of the tooth, right? Isn't that what we talked about? That the proximal plate rests on... you're going to try and have a guide plane that's about 1/3 of the width of the tooth. So I've shaved a little bit. You can kind of see now that I've shaved some of it. And then what you do is if you go back and put the graphite on, you can see how the marking changes and see if you're starting to get a wider guide plane than that little line that we had before. So if I do this, now we look and it's starting to widen. So now it's probably halfway down, right? And we want it to be 2/3 occlusal gingivally, and we're probably about half. We're getting close to 2/3. So then you're just gonna go back with the carver one more time. And again, you saw how I was, rather than just slicing back and forth, I was kind of rotating so that as you look occlusally, the tooth still holds its rounded shape. But if you look, so occlusally it still has its rounded shape because I was rounding as I trimmed. But if you look straight from the buckle, it's a little flat now as opposed to sticking out at the marginal ridge. There's a little bit flatness from the buckle perspective. Does that make sense? And the idea is just to have a flat but rounded surface that your proximal plate can rest against that has a minimal opening branches. Right? And then when you've got 3 of these and they're all in the same plane, the idea is that when you put the partial in, it's being guided into only one position and there's not going to be movement or rotation in lateral direction. Right? So that's the point of the guide planes. You're going to guide plane this tooth. You're actually not going to guide plane number 6 because it's already very flat. What we might do is change the height of contour on it, because when you guys go to do your graphite, you'll notice the height of contour is really high up, and that's kind of unaesthetic because then that means that the clasp is going to be really high up. And then you're going to guide plane this one. Once you finish your guide plane, you can check with Dr. Kim, and then we're going to work on the resties. For the resties, I'm not going to demo it now, but I want you to go back and look at what the requirements are, because it's a premolar. You're going to be, if you break it into thirds, a premolar is going to be, it's going to be 1/3 buccolingual and 1/3 mesial distal, where the molar
1/4 mesial and
is going to be, right, so you're going to have 1/3 buccolingual, oops, and then you're going to be only 1/4 for the molar. So it's going to be like this, okay?
Yeah.
I have a question. So